A few words here at the top that I just wanted to point out to you. I know it's in the quote, but let's take a look at these lovely words. So to mourn, right? To be sad, to weep or to cry is to be full of mourning. To captivate, you can even hear the root of the word, right? Captive. So to catch. A garment is something you wear, and so Pushkin is describing the forests as garmented in gold and purple. This lovely phrase, you could even talk about the fact that this is a really nice use of personification, right? So it's forests don't wear things, people do, and so you're giving to the forest the qualities of a person, which is what personification is. So the forest's garmented. The word billowing is like blowing, so you can hear it in there. And then the word grizzled, wintered. We often think of a grizzly bear, but to be grizzled, to be roughed up, unkempt, would be a great way of thinking about grizzled, harsh, right? All right, so we'll begin on page 120 in your books, October 14th. O mournful season that delights the eyes, your farewell beauty captivates my spirit. I love the pomp of nature's fading dyes, the forests garmented in gold and purple, the rush of noisy wind, and the pale skies half hidden by the clouds in darkling billows, and the rare sun rays and the early frost, and threats of grizzled winter, heard and lost. October 14th, 1920, Ellis Island. Dear Tova, Ilya got me into such trouble today. We were walking through a part of the hospital we didn't know very well. We heard the d-d-d-d of a machine. Ilya loves machines. He dragged me over to the place where some men were working on a balcony overlooking the harbor. I stepped closer to the workmen. One of them used English words I hadn't heard before. I don't think they were words Mama would want me to learn, but still I was curious. All of a sudden I realized Ilya was missing. He is never more than a step or two away from me. Now, for the first time in weeks, he had disappeared from my sight. I rushed toward the balcony, calling for him. A little boy could easily fall over the edge into the water. I ran from the balcony to the hallway, then back again, fretting in Russian. The workmen stopped their hammers to stare at me. It took me a moment for the sound of their machines to stop inside my head, but then, in the silence, I heard Ilya's high voice crying out. I turned toward the sound. There stood a row of metal toilet stalls. It was from the stalls that Ilya's voice came. Inside one, I found him. He had his back to me, and clouds of white paper flew over his head as if some great white bird were descending on him. But it was no bird. Ilya was unrolling toilet paper, an endless ribbon of it. As he unwound it, he laughed wildly. He cried, "Paper, paper!" I scolded him in Russian. I yelled for him to stop. "Look what you are doing, Ilya. You are going to get us killed. Look how you are wasting the paper." I grabbed his arm, holding it away, while frantically I started rolling the paper back. I was trying to wind it up so no one would punish us, and I was yelling at him in Russian. One of the workers started toward us. He pushed his big arm into the stall past me and Ilya. The worker ripped out the roll of toilet paper, throwing it over the rail and into the harbor. The white tail of Ilya's unravelings sailed over our heads and disappeared beyond the balcony. The worker looked as though he would next pitch us into the harbor. Well, I grabbed Ilya and ran with him so fast he cracked his shoulder against a wall. I didn't stop to comfort him. "We're going to get killed!" I cried, pulling him, checking over my shoulder every few seconds to see if the man was chasing us. "Don't you ever do that again," I told Ilya, trying to catch my breath. We collapsed on my cot. Nurse Bowen came over. Ilya held his shoulder and wept. "What happened?" the nurse asked, examining Ilya's shoulder. "Promise you won't tell Mr. Fargate?" I asked. "Promise you won't let him send us back to Russia?" "Tell me, Rifka," the nurse said. Ilya unrolled toilet paper, I said, believing Ilya had committed one of the worst offenses he could ever commit here. "Toilet paper?" the nurse asked. "What are you talking about, Rifka?" I told her about the stalls and the workmen. Nurse Bowen started laughing. "This is not funny," I told her. "In Russia, to waste paper is a terrible crime." "Well, in America it's not, Rifka," Nurse Bowen said. "There's plenty of paper, toilet paper, newspaper, every kind of paper. Don't worry, we're not going to send you back to Russia over a roll of toilet paper." She told me to tell Ilya that his shoulder would be fine. Already he had stopped crying. Nurse Bowen went away, still laughing. I felt a little insulted that she should laugh at me. But if paper was not so precious here, maybe it was a little funny. Maybe. And maybe I could get some of that plentiful paper Nurse Bowen talked about to write on. Ilya slid the pushkin out from under my pillow. He handed it to me to read to him. I said, No pushkin. I'm going to write a poem of my own. Remember, Tova, when I said I might try? Well, I've been writing a little at the back of our book. There is hardly any room left between my letters to you and my poetry. But still I keep writing, sometimes even in English. It's not very good poetry, mostly it doesn't rhyme, but I write it anyway. I write poems about Russia and Bobby Ruth and you and Hannah and coming to America and Ellis Island. I asked Nurse Bowen for some of that paper she was talking about. She gave me a handful. A handful of paper, Tova. The paper alone is enough to draw the words from inside me. I took the paper and our pushkin outside. Ilya, of course, followed behind me like a shadow. It is pretty here on the island. Across the harbor, tall buildings stand like giant guards, blocking my way to Mama and Papa. I fear those guards will never let me pass. Yet even in my fear, I cannot deny the beauty of this place. The leaves change color as they do in Berdichev. Geese fly overhead, honking, forming and reforming in the blue sky above Miss Liberty. The sun feels warm on my shoulders, and the smell of autumn tickles my nose. My writing maybe is not as beautiful as Pushkin's, but it comforts me. Ilya likes it too. He makes me read my poems over and over to him. It is nice to have an audience. You didn't know I would turn out to be a poet, did you, Tova? Is that being clever? Shalom, my cousin Rifka. Boys and girls, did you find a simile on this page? Take a moment and find that comparison using the word like or as. In this case, I'll give you the clue. It is like. Do you see it here? Tall buildings stand like giant guards blocking my way to Mama and Papa. This is a really nice piece of figurative writing, right? She's comparing the tall buildings to guards. And how could tall buildings be guards? Well, then she goes on to explain a little bit, right? They're guarding, they're preventing her from getting to her mother. We'll close the letter this time and come back for for our next part of Rifka's journey to America.